Hello, and welcome to Gold Theory. Today, my guest, Zach Peikon from Heller, we are going to talk about his wonderful journey, how he moved from MSG into the world of talent. And we're going to learn more about what his hobbies, what his interests, and just really his future and what he's really looking to do within this career, and how he's also moved from traditional financial services a little into the tech sphere now. So, on that note, I would love to turn it over to my guest, Zach. Welcome to the show. And I'd love for you to be able to tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Thanks for having me, Greg, and great to be with you today. I'm Zach Peikon. I'm a managing director at Heller, which is a leading technology executive search firm. Heller works with both large brands and private equity. So think of the National Football League, Walgreens, The Wynn, Babson College, Crayola, across all different industries. And then in private equity with Ares, Blackstone, Apollo, and Cerberus, we specialize in recruiting senior level transformational technology leaders, CIOs, CTOs, CISOs, and MarTech leaders all across the country. Prior to joining Heller, I was at Korn Ferry for 12 years, where I was a senior client partner and helped to build out our global marketing officer's practice.
Fantastic to have you here. Thank you for the, background where you are right now and a little bit more about Heller. But tell me, so the gig is new. How has it been? It's been, a few months now that you've been at Heller?
Yes, so I've been at Heller a couple of months. It's been a great, fast start, learning a lot, connecting with a lot of folks out in the market. As I like to refer to Heller, it's the Netflix of tech search. So this organization has incredible talent, incredible people, has done a tremendous amount of work in the tech space, and everything is tech, right? All the clients that I work with are either in tech,
Mm-hmm.
behind and need to get caught up, or are trying to get into the tech world. And so there's no better time to be in the tech space today. AI, right? That's the big buzzword of the moment. So a lot going
Mm-hmm.
on in that space as well. And we're working with clients, as quickly as possible to help them find the best talent, whether it's their next transformational CIO or to help them turn around their business with their CTO. Obviously, security is a huge focus for clients today. So chief information security officers is a hot spot too.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense, especially sort of as companies are, starting to further transform themselves. I know for just my career over the last, I want to say over 15 years now, I've been brought into organizations to help them really digitally transform. And it's been really quite a challenge. And people typically ask me, in fact, I have a meeting later on today with my mentee asking, he wants to talk about really steps behind transformation efforts. And it's not even really building out necessarily the strategy, but I notice it's quite often the culture, which is some of the hardest changes within an organization. People there for years used to doing what they're always doing and now being asked to do something different. And from your perspective in working with talent, because you're really in the field speaking with employees across all of these organizations. So you're hearing really what their challenges are. You're hearing what they're nervous about. You're hearing about what they think their company is going to do, as well as you're looking at potential open positions at different organizations. So what are you really seeing in the marketplace today? And what are you hearing from current employees, and what types of conversations are you having there? And then secondly, we'll get into what types of new positions are you seeing opening at organizations that people might be able to start applying for as well?
Yeah. So to your first question, this is what I like to call the $1 billion question, because I get this one multiple times daily. As far as the market, I would say that there's a lot of volatility, there's a lot of
Mhm.
uncertainty, there's a lot of change. People are nervous. The news isn't always so great. That said, I think leading organizations still need top talent, right? And
Mhm.
so, in order to do that, they need to be able to bring on board leading executives and build strong teams to drive results for their organizations. And there's a lot of noise out there too. So, I always recommend to executives um, read, talk, listen, get out there, but then also take some time to process, because so many times executives will say to me, "Oh my God, the market's fallen, there's no jobs, like no one's hiring." And there's cycles, right? In some ways,
Yes.
I kind of
Yeah.
think of it, most recently in the last few years, we've been in like three cycles: the pre-COVID,
Hmm.
during COVID, and now the post-COVID.
Yep.
The
Post
pre-COVID
COVID era. Yeah.
exactly was more of like a normal cycle, right? What we were used to. Companies were hiring, people were making
Mhm.
moves, people were coming and going. Then all of a sudden COVID hits, and I'm having conversation with clients initially where they're like, "Oh my God, we don't know if our business is going to be here tomorrow. We've got to put our search on hold. We're trying to figure out what's most critical, important," right? That was a very unique period of time. And then all of a sudden, it just kind of, the switch flipped. And all of a sudden, everybody was hiring left and right. And it was more of a candidate market. So
Yeah.
talking to executives, and people are getting multiple different offers and kind of just like write your own check. So it's a very unique period of time. And now fast forward to today, where that pendulum has shifted a little bit, and it's a little bit quieter. But again, that said, organizations are hiring, they need great talent. And that's where we come in, right? To help them identify the talent, where to find the talent, how to get to the talent. Um, and for top level executives, it's not just about finding a job, it's about finding an opportunity in an organization where they can have impact and drive growth.
Is it possible to spot trends? Like, are you noticing that it's cyclical enough where you can sort of see signs and start spotting where maybe it's becoming an employee versus an employer market, or just anything of that nature? Anything that you can maybe any advice that you can give to anyone that might be either looking to make a move or those that are looking for jobs right now? Any signs in the market that they can look for?
For sure. There's definitely things that executives can do. I think first and foremost, just reading, right? Seeing what's out there, and then speaking to people that are in your space. A lot of times jobs are not posted, and they're kind of
Mm.
in the hidden market, or they're like
Mhm.
a pocket listing from a real estate
Yeah.
perspective. People might be familiar with that term. And so
Mhm.
it's really important to, know what's going on in your industry, in your function, not just to be an expert as a functional expert to the role that you do day in and day out, but for your own career. I always recommend to executives, you have to be your biggest advocate, right, for your career. Nobody's coming to Bob or Sally and saying, "Hey, do you want to be the next CIO, or do you want to be our next CMO?" If that's something that you want to
Yeah.
do, great, and then go do it. And you can make that happen. Coming back again to the trends, though, I'd also say, looking at organizations, doing research, kind of seeing what they're hiring for now, what the postings look like. A great way to look is to see a collection of companies. And if they're posting tons of jobs, it's likely that they're hiring for others, right? And so it might be a really hot time. On the flip side, maybe you don't see a ton of postings. Maybe you don't even see the dream job that you want. That doesn't mean that they're still not looking to hire, right? I mean, the best companies, the most innovative organizations always need great talent. And in order to do that, they've got to be out there in the market, thinking
Mhm.
about talent. And then for talent,
Yeah.
it's always better to be more proactive versus reactive.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And as you're saying that, which is great, I mean, for the individual to be proactive versus reactive, but then at the same time, I mean, in theory, right, companies would love to retain talent. So what could companies be doing maybe better, especially from what you're seeing, to retain that talent, right? What is going to keep someone from really jumping ship to another organization? Because like you'll read different stories or anecdotes where it's not necessarily about the money. Is it about the culture? Is it about their ability to move through the organization? What is it truly, do you think, that you've seen that keeps an employee at an organization?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say there's a few components to that. I think first, and you touched on it, it is about culture, right? That kind of
Mhm.
sets the tone. You can give someone a title raise, you can give someone, more money.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, I'm gonna interject for 2 seconds. I like that title raise, but what I'm also seeing, title raises without the actual raise
yeah,
happening as well across
yes,
organizations, you know?
yes.
I think that is what's upsetting, certain individuals, but, back to what you were saying. I just had to chime in on that note.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And definitely seeing a lot of that. I would say, though, it does start with the culture because that's what you
Mhm.
live and breathe every single day, day in and day out, and working with so many different clients and executives. In a lot of ways, that's what gets people pumped up in the morning and energized and gets them out of bed. And on the flip side, your culture is so critical because it's also what gives you energy during those periods where maybe things are not so great, or maybe the business is challenged, or the product flopped, or the presentation didn't go well, or the quarter hasn't been so great, right? And so having a collaborative, team oriented, positive culture is
Mhm.
extremely important. Otherwise, it makes it very difficult to retain, develop that talent for the future. And, you could reach out to someone on a Tuesday and that culture isn't there. And all of a sudden, your rock star is out the door a couple weeks from now. So it's really important to maintain a strong culture. And what I mean by culture too is that's not just words on a wall. That's not just
Yes.
like a
Yeah.
catchy slogan. That's actually investing in your people, in your organization, showing them that you care, going the extra mile. All those things make a really big difference during both the highs and the lows. And they're going to be highs and they're going to be lows. And that's okay. That's
Yeah.
natural. But that is extremely important. I think also to retain talent, you've got to give them opportunities. And what I mean by that is you got to show them the roadmap, right?
Yeah.
So, someone comes in at an entry level, great. A lot of times, I'll speak to executives like, hey, I just entered in and, they want to be the CEO. Well, the odds are it's probably
Yeah.
not going to happen overnight, but that doesn't mean that it can't happen in the future. And so for most executives, again, whether they're early in their career, mid-career, later in their career, it's important for them to understand what does the landscape look like, right? Like, how do I continue to grow both professionally and personally?
Yeah.
I think the highest performing executives that I interact with, they all want to have impact. And what that means can be different things, but the top executives, they all want to be able to have a positive impact and be able to, drive growth or turn around the business, build the team, and leave a lasting positive impact on the organization.
Coming back to the culture piece, and I'm going to take it kind of the executive level right now, but it could really be and across any level within an organization. Is the book Five Dysfunctions of a Team, right? And so where you kind of can take a look at that book, and that book is all about how to build trust among the executive suite. But that again could be again across all different functions. It could be just your peers across the organization, and trust being not trusting that someone is going to get their work done, but trusting that you can truly be honest with each other within a conference room, right? So if you're there and you're brainstorming, you're sharing ideas, people feeling open and free and that they're not going to be criticized for sharing their ideas because anything could potentially be good for the organization, right? So what are your thoughts in terms of back to that culture, but really about the way the C-suite or not even if you're not in the C-suite, what you could do, even if you're across middle management, with your peers at an organization to really build that trust so you can get everyone really to work together. Because I always look at organizations, one, the business world and your competition, it's hard enough to fight to win. If you're fighting internally, it's like a sports team. If a sports team's fighting, how are they going to beat the competition, right? So how do you, as an individual, help to foster that? Like, say you're in a culture that's not fostering that. How do you, as an individual, from your perspective, how can someone really truly foster that and build momentum within an organization?
Yeah, it's a great question. Trust is extremely important and in a lot of situations is underrated or kind of put to the side as if, oh, of course, right? We all have trust.
Yep.
Trust takes time to build. It's not magic. It doesn't happen overnight. And I think it's really important for executives at any level to do a few things in order to build that trust. So one, you've got to come in and you've got to listen. We've got 2 ears and one mouth. And so it's really important to come in and to listen. That's one way
Mhm.
to build
So a 2 to
trust.
1 ratio.
2 to 1, exactly.
2 to 1 ratio, yes, yeah,
And I
right.
think not just to listen and to nod,
Yeah.
but to
Mhm.
really process what others are
Mm.
saying. As an executive recruiter, right, all day, every day, that's what I do. I'm on the phone, I'm talking to CEO, then I'm on a call with a CHRO, then I'm on with a CIO, then I'm on a call with my colleague, then I'm putting out a fire drill, then I'm doing a negotiation. There's a lot of different situations, right? And trust is extremely important in order to get things done and to be successful. And so to do that, I think you've got to listen first and foremost. Two, you got to show people that you care. And it's
Mhm.
not just saying,
Eh,
"Oh, I care."
yeah,
It's
yep,
you gotta talk the talk and
yep.
walk the walk. You've got to show them that you truly care about their career, about their business, about future, right? People are making big decisions for their families, for their careers. It's extremely important. And it's emotional. So you got to show your clients, the executives, that you really care and that you're willing to go the distance, right?
Mhm,
This
mhm.
isn't clock in at 9, leave at 5. This is a 24/7 job if you want to be the best in the world, or as I like to say, the LeBron James of all things in the recruiting space. So that's important. And I learned a lesson many years ago from a senior executive that I worked with, which I carry with me today. And she told me, Zach, always assume positive intent. I think a lot of
Mm,
times,
yeah,
the world that we live in today, it's very quick to go from trust to distrust, or to walk in
yeah,
the room and just to assume, oh, they're out to get me, or
mhm, yeah.
they're not
People
on
are
my
cynical,
side.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
cynical and
yeah,
negative and
yeah.
pessimistic. You're going to run into those people, and you're going to run into those situations, and you're going to have to work through them. But it's been a great piece of advice. If you can assume positive intent, if you can enter the room, if you can come to that conversation with an open mind and assume positive intent, it's going to go a long way to help you develop relationships and in your career.
Well, it makes me think of 2 things right now. One is you were saying someone, mentioning to me as a CFO at an organization I was with years ago, and he always used to tell everyone, as managers, basically make yourself obsolete. Essentially train your teams to eventually take over your job, so then therefore you can focus on bigger initiatives for the organization, right? It's sort of that, part of that kind of training process. And then secondly, it made me think of, kind of Jack Welch, from GE back in the day. He had this like magic quadrant, which placed employees in different categories, and you could have like the high performer, great culture individual. I forget what it actually said. I know it's high performer, like great culture, and then the other was high performer but extremely toxic, right? And then there's two other quadrants, and as they kind of placed people into these different areas, what happens sometimes is that high performer could be the most toxic person at an organization. So then an organization has to figure out, what do we do? Do we risk basically this toxicity permeating the organization, which could destroy it from inside? Or do we risk this high performer and letting them go? And now we're losing X amount of revenue, which could also be potentially detrimental to a company based on the size of that organization. So what would you say to someone if they came to you, and maybe they have come to you over the last 12 years? What do I do about my employees? Or how do I phase them out? Or do I performance manage them out? Or do people come to you for advice in how to kind of manage these particular situations as well?
People come to me for advice on the craziest things that you can think of. People come to me for advice on things that they probably haven't shared with their 5 closest friends.
It's like a
As
hairdresser.
as a
You know, they're sitting there
as a
getting,
hairdresser,
it's like
coming on.
they're their personal therapist.
Yeah, because again, you're interacting with some of the smartest, most successful, driven people in the world. And at the same time, right, we're all looking for insights and how do we continue to grow and develop and get better. as leaders. And so people will reach out to me on all different things on, careers or challenging situations or difficult bosses or toxic environments. I mean, I get a call every week. Hey, Zach, I'm at XYZ. This place is crazy. You got to get me out of here. Right. So
Mhm.
I've seen and heard a lot. I think in the situations around, toxic employees, and it makes me think of some videos that I've seen with Simon Sinek where he talks about this as well.
Mm,
It really depends on organizations, right?
yes.
So if some organizations are just going to turn the other way and just say, hey, right, Mike or Sally, they're a top performer, doesn't really matter. We're just going to let them do what they do.
Uh,
And as long as they drive results, like we're okay with it. And, unfortunately, that does exist in a lot of places today. I'm sure that a lot of your listeners know about or are experiencing. On the flip side, there are places where they won't put up with that or they're going to address it, or else then those individuals won't be there. Those tend
yeah.
to be organizations where they're going to be able to retain their talent for longer period of time, where people are going to be happier, where people are going to be able to have different experiences. So it can really vary from organization to organization. I'd say though, in the long term, nobody wants to work in a toxic environment. I've
Mhm.
interviewed thousands of executives and nobody's ever said, "Hey, I want to work in that toxic environment." People will say, "Hey, I'm willing to join XYZ," or "Should I join XYZ?" That's a very personal decision, for each individual. But nobody ever says they want to be in toxic environment. And so I think that's where doing the research in advance, understanding the companies, understanding what great looks like there, what their cultures are, who are the people that have come, who are the people that have gone, speaking to
Yep.
people that are there today or that have departed. That's the way executives can be smarter about, okay, with 95% confidence, I can say this is the right next move for me.
Say someone's out of a job. What do you recommend that they do to get their next best job? Like, so for instance, XYZ company has layoffs, and now that person's looking. They might be a little desperate. They might come off a little desperate. Really, how should they be structuring their resume? How should they be speaking with executive recruitment firms like yourself? And how should they be positioning themselves to get really that next great role and not just an interim role until they find what it is they really want? Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like many
Yeah.
people get caught in those types of situations. How do you navigate that? And that happens at any level, not even the most senior levels, but across any level. How do you recommend someone truly navigate that experience? Because I'm sure most people have experienced that somewhat, yeah, at some point in their life.
I've worked with tons of executives who, are in roles, out of roles, in transition, right? So at different phases of their career. And so, someone that's, recently left an organization, I think it's a chance to take a step back, take a deep
Mm,
breath, and really think about what's next, right?
mm,
And in some
mhm,
ways, they have the chance to think about it a little bit more clearly. Sometimes executives that I'm working with that are in an organization, they're so focused right on the day-to-day work that they're doing that they might not have the ability to really think about what's next in some ways. And so if someone is in transition, I'd say take a step back and think about what's next. What do you want to do? What are your superpowers? Where can you add the most value to an organization? In addition, I always recommend to executives map out your career strategy. Just like you'd build out your marketing strategy or your tech strategy, create your career strategy so that you have a roadmap.
mm,
So many executives over the years will say to me, Zach, I haven't done this in a while. I'm rusty. The game has changed. I don't know what to do. I've never done this before. This is uncomfortable. Just know if you experiencing any of that, everyone else is as well. I
I was
think
gonna
it's
say, I've heard people say that to me left and right in the field. It's like, oh, I'm not, I'm rusty on that. I hear the exact same thing that you're saying, that when people come to me asking about opportunities. So it's funny that you're saying that. So yeah.
yeah, and it's different, right? Like a job search isn't something that you go to a class to learn about or that you pick up a textbook or there's this secret sauce. It's kind of creating energy and creating momentum. And what I mean by that is map out the organizations that you're excited about and that you feel like you could make a positive contribution to. Doesn't mean you're going to go there, doesn't mean that they have a role,
Hmm.
but you're kind of crafting that strategy. And then from there, identify who do you know that works at those organizations or who can get you connected to someone there. Then from there, start having conversations. Just get out there. Sometimes I think people can get a little bit paralyzed or kind of in one place. And I always
Yep.
recommend just get out there. Just start taking your shot. Let it fly, right? See where it goes. And then you're going to
Like you have
start,
nothing to lose, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Then you're start to learn and kind of see
Hmm.
what's out there. Also, it's going to help you as you have those conversations really hone in on your value to the organization. I've worked with the best chief marketing officers and tech leaders in the world. And so many times they'll say to me, when it comes to myself, I'm having some trouble and it's a little bit different or uncomfortable. And
Mm.
it just takes reps, right? Big
Yes.
sports fan. So just kind of getting out there and getting the at bats,
Yeah.
getting the shots up. And then once
Yep.
you have the track tape down and you're connecting with people, all of a sudden it starts to just become more natural. And then all of a sudden, people start to think of you. And I always recommend to executives make sure when you're having conversations with others that you really focus in on the core areas that you're interested in and the value that you bring. And don't overwhelm the person on the other side with too much because they'll likely
Mm.
want to help. But if you give them 50 different things, they're going to walk away
Yeah.
confused. And if
And
you don't,
overwhelmed.
yeah, and if you don't give them anything,
Yeah.
then how are they going to help you? So think of
Yep.
what are your 3 or 4 superpowers, really lean into that, and there's power there. And then in addition, everybody always talks about the network, the network, the
Hmm.
network, the network. I'm introverted and I'm extroverted. It doesn't really matter. We all have a network, and it's about how do you leverage and connect with your network in order to help you find that next opportunity. And I've seen today the network be even more critical because with ChatGPT and organizations being inundated with resumes, they'll be like, all 10 of these people look great. How do we differentiate? And sometimes
Yep.
the difference of someone getting an interview could just be, well, this person worked with this person at this organization previously. Oh, we should definitely talk to her. We should definitely meet him. So the network is very important.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that, and it's interesting that you're just kind of talking about, resumes right now, and because I'll be speaking with people and that are looking for new positions, and they'll say, "Oh, I've interviewed at like a few hundred places, and it's just like I'm instantly denied," and so they're applying via different mediums, and I've even had people tell me before that like within 30 seconds of hitting submit, they're already declined. So there's some sort of automation, I'm assuming at times that are scanning like ATS scanners, I guess. Tell us about the process of building a resume really in this day and age right now, and what are the types of resumes that if you are submitting blindly and not necessarily through an individual, through your network, what should a resume have? What is really an optimal resume, we'll say, for a senior executive, in this, in today's world? What should be on a resume and how should it be set up?
I always like to say with resumes, you ask, yeah, 100 people, you get 102 opinions on resumes.
Uh-huh.
Because everybody's got an opinion, and there
Mhm.
isn't necessarily one, exact format. And I've reviewed thousands of resumes. I think though there are a few key ingredients, to
Mhm.
to differentiate. So one, ideally, you want to imagine that, Greg, if you dropped your resume in the middle of the street in New York City and they didn't know who you
Mm-hmm.
were or anything about marketing, that they
Mm-hmm.
could quickly figure out, right, who you are and what you've
Mm-hmm.
done and how you accomplished it. So you want to be able to take the reader on the journey of, this is what I did, this is how I did it, this was the result. And if you can
Mm-hmm.
take the reader on that journey, that is going to be extremely powerful. In addition, accomplishments, accomplishments, accomplishments. So many times clients will say, Zach, this executive's background looks interesting
Mm-hmm.
or is a little bit underwhelming because it doesn't have any of their accomplishments. We don't know what they've truly done in the
What they've done.
organization. It just talks
Mm-hmm.
about their responsibilities, and it doesn't really bring to life the value that they've created in their previous roles and organizations. So
Yeah.
think
Cause and
through.
effect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's really important to bring that to life. People also say, oh, should it be a page? Should it be 2 pages? Should it be 5
Mm.
pages?
Yeah.
I think it's totally fine for your resume to be 2 pages. No client's ever said to me, we're not going to hire someone because their resume was 2 pages versus a page. What you want to make sure, though, is that it tells your story and that it's
Okay.
effective and that each word counts. If there's something in there that's just extra, take it out.
Take it out.
And
Yep.
also, you can customize it. So you can have what I like to call a foundational resume, which is kind of the base, but maybe you're applying to company ABC123 and you need to tweak some things for that company and for that role. And then you're applying to XYZ and you need to tweak that a little bit and change that. And then I
Mm-hmm.
think also you want to just make sure that it's going to capture the reader's attention because people have
Mm.
short attention spans. And so
Yes.
I would show it to some friends. I would show it to some family. I would show it to some colleagues, some former colleagues, and just, hey, like, shoot me straight, right? Does this get your attention? What am I missing? So that they give you real live feedback. That will be extremely helpful.
So essentially, just don't make it about your accolades or what you've done. Tell the story. Really bring it in. It's like, because we as humans, right, we gravitate towards stories. So maybe bring that storytelling approach to the resume. Maybe it'll make it even more memorable to the individual, and maybe they can kind of see where you could potentially sit within that organization. So that's an interesting tidbit. I'm going to kind of switch it now to the other side of the organization, something that can be challenging, which is hiring, right? So when people are looking to increase headcount within an organization, the first thing is, if you're, building a new position, what should that new position be? And it could be because it's a new function, and it could be, the company is advancing in somewhere, and you need to identify what the roles and responsibilities are of that particular role. Then there's, vying for budget with the CFO for that role, and then you're out in the marketplace looking for people. What are tips that you can give to hiring managers that, one, know that they need to open more roles on their team, but maybe they're nervous speaking with their manager or CFO to open those particular roles? And then when they start looking for individuals, what's really the best process? And then the interview process, because what I've seen through my career personally, for some reason, I've always known pretty much within the first few minutes if this person was going to be perfect for the role or not. But then sometimes you have these committees, right? It's like this buying committee. It has to go through all these individual people. Then you have all these individual opinions. And sometimes you start to second guess yourself, or you'll make a hire based off of, what the committee thinks, even though it's going against your gut. And for me personally, when I've done that, it hasn't necessarily been the right hire, but when I've always gone with my gut, which is that instinct of, I know this person's the right person, they've always worked out. How do you navigate that when you're on the hiring side? Like, what advice do you have for people? Because it's not easy to necessarily go through this entire process. And by the way, what's nerve-wracking is sometimes when you finally get a rec open, because it's this elongated process, what you want to do is be able to hire quickly. One, before that budget potentially gets taken away, because it's very easy sometimes for
Yes.
budgets to get cut. You know, you just never know. All of a sudden, a quarter goes by, you haven't hired that role yet. Boom, now that budget's gone. So this is sort of a loaded, multi-part question here, but what advice do you have for hiring managers trying to really navigate this entire experience? Because it really isn't an easy experience.
Yeah. So a few different questions there. I think
Yeah.
first around knowing you need to add the headcount, you got to be able to show the business case, right? So why are we going to bring on these roles, or why are these the most mission critical roles to the organization now?
Mhm.
And make that business case. If it's just, hey, we just feel or think, probably not going to happen, won't make sense, and it's not going to get through. So I think it's really being thoughtful around, why is this role important?
Mhm.
What are we really looking for? Right. So
Mm.
once you've identified, okay, we need to hire for XYZ or for these roles, it's then understanding, okay, what is it that we're really looking for in this hire? What are the technical capabilities that we're looking for? Do we know the technical capabilities that we're looking for? Or maybe we need to work with a search firm like a Heller or others to help us identify, what that looks like.
Mhm.
Also, understanding your organization's culture, which we were talking about a little
Mhm.
bit earlier, right? Someone could be a rock star on paper and fall
Mhm.
flat in their face on company A, and then they could go to company B and they knock it out of the park, right? So really thinking through the cultural attributes is extremely important. I think also then coming up with a search strategy, right? Like where is this talent? How do we find this talent? How do we get to the talent, right? And that's where a search firm can add a lot of value to an organization. What does our process look like? You talked about committees. I've worked with a
Yes.
lot of clients that have tons of executives involved and lots of committees. Studies show after about 4 or 5 interviews, there's not a lot more value that's added into a search process. Instead,
Mm.
it just kind of creates more of a backlog and confusion.
Mhm.
uh, I've again been involved in hundreds and of searches and interviewed thousands of executives. There is no perfect candidate.
Mm.
Nobody is perfect. We are
Yep.
all constantly evolving and learning. I always say to people, if you've met the perfect candidate, introduce them to me because I would love to meet you or him. And
They're
so
non-existent. Yes.
non-existent, it's like
Uh-huh.
what we call the purple unicorn. That
Mm.
said, people are awesome and people are very talented and people can do incredible things if you give them the opportunity to, and if you kind of show them the roadmap. And so going back to the process, sometimes that can be the most time consuming because there's just so many, what I like to call chefs in the kitchen.
Mm. Mhm.
You have too many chefs
Yeah.
in the kitchen. Otherwise, that food's not going to taste good. That food's not going to get out
Yeah,
and
true.
nobody's going to be happy. And then you got to have a great candidate experience, right? So many times I hear from executives, I interviewed with XYZ. I'm not going there. The experience was terrible. They don't know what's happening over there, or, they don't know what they're looking for. Or I waited, 2 months before I heard back from them. Those data points, which organizations don't always think about, are extremely important because that's your candidate
Yeah.
experience. People's talk
Yes.
and then they tell their
Yeah.
friends, and then that grows, and then that gets into social, and then that goes into your brand, into your culture. So the way that you do anything is everything, and that's extremely important. And so there's a whole different facet of moving pieces in a search, and it takes time and there's different ways to go about it, but you've got to have a plan. You've got to be organized. You've got to have a structure. Otherwise,
Mhm.
you'll probably be looking for that role or trying to get approval for it 6 months from the time you tried to do that to begin
Yep,
with.
exactly. Yeah, to make that business case. And to me, I look at, obviously when you're, making that hire, as we just said, it's like, investing in any new technology as part of your division, or is really building that business case to get any form of investment. I think that in itself, to be quite frank, is a bit of a skill in being able to sell it internally, essentially, and speaking the right language of your CFO and your CEO or COO, anyone involved in that
Yes.
decision making. And what you really also said, which is key too, is kind of being sort of organized. And now, which is I'm gonna bring it over to you and say, Heller, right? So, how does someone embrace, an organization like Heller, and what should they expect from an executive recruitment firm? And I know each recruitment firm is different. Some are on retainer, others are not. Others are on a percentage, right? And a commission. And in that case, how would they come to you at Heller? And beyond just finding the right employee, do you really work as really a consultant and sit down with them and help them map out what this strategy is? I would love to really know how you work with your clients.
Yeah. As far as with executives, it's a few things. In a lot of ways, we're hired on a project by project basis for our clients to find the best X, right? So
Hmm.
all we do at Heller is tech, 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 and more tech. That is our core specialization and our secret sauce. We know the best tech talent across the globe and have worked on hundreds of searches there. As far as how to get on Heller's radar, I would say it's a few things. Being a leader in your field, doing great
Mm,
work. I'm on the phone all day, every day, talking to people, understanding what's going on in their companies, what's happening in their
uh-huh.
field. One of the questions I like to ask is, who's doing it great? Who's differentiating? Who should I be speaking to, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And then, doing my own due diligence and,
Yep.
mapping that out and understanding who those individuals are and what that looks like. So
Hmm.
show up every day, keep
Ah,
going forward, do great work. It generally doesn't happen overnight, but over time, that compounds. And all of a sudden, you build off of this and you build off of that. And you started out at the bottom of the organization and now you're in the C suite, or you're a director or VP who wants to become that next CIO or CTO or CMO.
mhm.
You can get there. It's just a matter of being thoughtful and strategic and understanding within your organization, what does great look like and what do you need to do to get there? Again, most organizations aren't tapping you on the shoulder, hey, you did a great job. You've got to be an advocate for your own career in order to get to the next levels and to take on the right assignments. So many times people will tell me I was in eight doing this and this and this, and I'll say, well, how important was that to the organization? Did they value it?
Mm.
Is
Yep.
that
Yeah.
where other leaders came from? That's really important. To the flip side, on the executive search side, I would say a few things as far as, process. I'm a trusted advisor, right? I don't view my job
Yes.
as a recruiter. I'm a true advisor to my clients. I really get to understand their businesses, their cultures, the people. That's the way I'm most effective. So that way, when I'm out in the market and I'm talking to executives, I'm really an ambassador for my clients.
Mhm.
Some people will refer to it as like a hired gun. I don't
Yeah.
necessarily see it that way. I'm like an extension of my clients, in financial services, in technology, in healthcare,
Yes.
in retail. And then from there, once I understand who they are and how they operate, then I can be really effective to help them find that next rock star to join their organization.
Yeah.
Um, and we
Yeah, it's
have,
almost like once you're embedded in the culture, essentially, like when you're embedded in the culture, you truly understand what it is that they need. Almost like a casting agent really being close with a director and a script writer to understand what individuals are truly needed for each of the individual roles. So it makes really quite a bit of sense that you're really embedding yourself to truly understand what's there, because that then enables you to find that right person that not only has maybe the right talent, the right skill set, the right growth opportunity, but then also would fit the culture of the organization the correct way as well, it sounds like.
Exactly, exactly. And then, from there, it's really understanding the specific role that we're hiring for. What are they looking for? Where is that talent? How do we get to that talent? And then from there, right, we're off to the races, and then having constant dialogue with our clients to get them the best talent for that specific search and for their organization.
So with that, how are you seeing, because you're on the front lines, how are you seeing AI affect this entire process, right? Because you'll hear about like silent firing that's taking place. You'll hear about others that are staying low at organizations because they're, worried about being laid off in tumultuous market conditions right now. Others that are nervous that AI is going to usurp their positions. Others that are excited about AI because they're learning more about how to utilize it and then apply it in different capacities at organizations. Others that are thinking AI will, just like like any revolution, like you have the industrial revolution brought upon new jobs, that AI will also continue to bring about new jobs, new functions, new skill sets. What are you seeing, and what are your thoughts on, how AI is starting potentially to drive this process, or is it not driving this process? I'm really just kind of curious what you're seeing from your perspective.
So when it comes to AI, there's a lot of discussion. There's a lot of
Hmm.
excitement. I think there's a lot of uneasiness, and there's a lot of learnings, I think, that are going to come with it. And so we are in the second inning when it comes to
Mm.
AI. We are super early into what AI is, how does it work, what does it do. And so my recommendation to any executive today is just spend some time, right? Getting to understand, like, what is AI? How does it work? How can I use it? How can I get smarter? Because it's all going to be part of our roles going forward and into the future.
Yeah.
Anyone that says that they know exactly, what that means and what that looks like, I'd love to connect with them. But I think just spending the time to
You can
get
just ask
smarter.
AI.
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
use that ChatGPT.
You
Ask
can.
Claude. Hire Claude and ask Claude.
And I think the most sophisticated and smartest executives see it as an added tool in the tool belt versus, oh my God, my job's, gone. And I think people that understand how to use AI versus it being, the enemy is going to be really critical.
Hmm.
And so again, I'd say we're early days in this process, and it's really fascinating and exciting. I think it's going to continue to evolve, as we go forward into the future.
And I mean, even just with AI, like I'm reading about stories of, people obviously using AI or just Chat GPT to completely write their resumes for them, or because many interviews are taking place virtually right now, that as they're asked questions from organizations, they're quickly typing to Chat GPT. But I've also heard situations where people have accidentally kind of read the whole prompt, and then the interviewer's like, "Are you reading a prompt right now?" And so people sort of getting busted in that capacity. But that's a great segue into coming back to kind of the leadership piece, right? Because we have, AI has entered the workforce, and there's a certain form, I think, of kind of management that people need to have to kind of manage their teams and provide the right training and comfort level and everything that they sort of need to grow within their positions. But then you also have newer generations that have entered the workforce. How have you seen management change, or what do you think management needs to do, or how should management change their approach? Because the way, a leader may have managed a organization 10, I'll just even say 5 years ago, 5, 10, even 15, 20 years ago, is more than likely or needs to be different today based on new demographics that have entered organizations and new technologies. What advice do you have for managers of today in how they can continue to grow to be, you know, great managers, great leaders, those that are, entrusted by their employees? Because that's one of the biggest piece. They say people don't leave a company; they leave their manager too, right? So, what advice do you have for managers of today and how they can manage the evolution of the business world?
Yeah, so I'll start here with Gary Vee. Are you familiar with Gary Vee at all?
Quite familiar. Yes. Yep.
Yes. So Gary Vee talks a lot about this topic, and one of the things that has resonated with me is he says a great manager should make sure that they really know their top employees and that they're going and spending time with them and sitting down with them and having a meal with them and understanding
Mhm.
what are their goals and what motivates them and what drives them, and really understanding them as a full human being versus just an employee. Uh,
Mhm.
it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier around like you got to show people that you care and
Mhm.
that you're
Yes.
willing to invest in them. That is extremely important to people. People don't want to just feel like another number or a cog in the wheel. And like you said, Greg, people don't leave companies, they leave managers, right? And a lot of times because they were toxic or they weren't getting the development that they needed or that promotion that they were told was coming didn't happen, right? So you really got to make sure that you're investing the time in your people, showing them that you care, taking the time to really get to know them and to understand
Mhm.
where they want to go, and then helping them flourish and helping them, create that roadmap to get there. People that are high striving executives, again, at various points of their career, are looking for mentorship, are looking for sponsorship. And so managers are being pulled in 100 different directions. It's a tough time to
Yes.
be
Yeah.
a manager today. And at the same time, it's a huge opportunity when done right for organizations to retain, develop, and grow their talent for the future too.
Mhm. No, and that makes complete sense, and I feel like Gary is a little bit of an anomaly to a degree because he's extremely outspoken and he has a lot of different opinions, and his organization, is at, I think, a size that he himself is probably able to help guide that culture and also give that personal attention. What about an organization that has 10,000 people that's global, right? And you have someone maybe that's a little younger in the organization. They feel that maybe their manager is, fighting for them, but maybe they feel their manager isn't senior enough. Maybe that manager is also doing the best they can, but maybe they're feeling beat up because in this day and age you have employee surveys, and sometimes with employee surveys, employees like to find what's wrong with an organization more than potentially what is the benefit of being at that organization, right? So how do you kind of how does the employee and call it the middle management manager, or even if someone that's senior at the organization is still so large and just global, how do they make a dent, or how do they take a ripple? And as we talked about earlier, how do they do something that enables it to compound throughout the organization and continue to grow and maybe even help change what that particular culture is and how they're maturing, their current employees. Like, what are you seeing there? And what advice do you have for people in those positions?
So, first, it starts with the work. You got to do great
Mhm.
work. If you do
Mhm.
great work over time, people will start to notice. So
Mhm.
many executives, that I've met with will say, right, I started here and then came here and then here. And I'll say, like, how'd you do that? Right? Like, tell me,
Mhm.
how did that work? And so many times they'll say, it just kind of started with showing up, asking questions, being engaged, understanding what's most important in the organization, how do things get done, right? All those things are extremely important and subtle at the same time. But doing great work, if you do that over time, all of a sudden people are going to notice and be like, "Oh, what's going on there? I want to work with this person. Who's this
Hmm.
guy?" Earlier in my career, part of the way that I got involved in the marketing, digital, and tech landscape was nobody wants to touch digital. Nobody understood it. They were like, "You're the
Yeah.
young guy. You go ahead and figure it out." And so that was a huge opportunity, right? And I seized it. And so I think it's understanding you got to come in, you got to show up, you got to do great work. There are going to be some bumps along the road.
Hmm.
I think it's also important to understand again, how does your organization work? The way your organization works could be very different than the one that's down the hall from you, or that's across the street from you, or that's across the globe. And so understanding what your organization values is extremely critical.
Hmm.
Also, if you want to grow within your organization, look around, look at the executives who are there, look who's leading the company. What did their backgrounds look like? What did they
Hmm.
do to get to where they are? Um, it's also important to make sure that people know about the great work that you're doing too. Sometimes somebody could be like in the corner office doing awesome work and nobody knows. So you got to
Well,
make
as you said earlier, advocate for yourself, right? Be your own advocate.
yeah,
But I think sometimes people struggle with, being their own advocate and others feeling like they're bragging about themselves. It's like almost that fine line, I think, of how they need to approach it. But I agree with you in terms of circulating what it is that you've been able to do for the organization.
for sure. And I hear and I see this a lot between arrogance and
Mm.
confidence. And there is a difference between the two. And so if someone is doing great work and they're not getting the recognition for it, you got to speak up.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it's not going to change. At the same time, too, I always recommend to executives keep your eyes and ears open, right? Like maybe an opportunity from the outside comes to you through your network or through a recruiter, or you're at an event and you meet someone, right? You just
Mhm.
never know. And
Mhm.
all it takes is one, right?
Yeah. Well,
So,
as they say, sometimes right time, right place, you know? Or, an opportunity will never hesitate to pass you by, as they say. It's making sure that you're putting yourself out there or even just with luck, right? They also say you create your own luck. If you're putting yourself in the right situation, it could be eventually then the right time, the right place, and the right amount of luck just all happening at one time.
yeah, I always tell executives talent, timing, and luck.
Talent, timing, and luck.
So, what I mean by
That's
that
perfect.
is one, the executive, he or she's got to have the talent, right, for that specific organization
Mhm.
and opportunity. Then two, the timing component, meaning the executive is open to new opportunities, and that company, right, is looking for someone with that specific talent, because someone could be the best tech leader in the world. If the company's hiring a CFO at that moment, probably not the right
Mhm.
fit. And then do truly believe that there is some luck involved, having had the backstage pass and worked on numerous amounts of searches and kind of seeing how the stars aligned. At the same time, executives who work hard, are strategic,
Mhm.
collaborate, they tend to create their luck too in a lot of
Mhm.
ways. And so that's really important. In the words of the great Kobe Bryant, just keep going forward. Just keep going
Mhm.
forward. You might not have the
Yep.
dream job today. You might not work in the company that you love today, or as I like to say, not yet. That doesn't mean it can't happen.
Yep.
You might be working through a challenging situation. It's a chapter. It's not forever. Um, and it's like, what are those learnings that you can take from those situations that are going to help guide you into your next opportunity and organization?
Zach, this has been a fantastic conversation There are many, many other questions I would love to ask you, and there are topics that we didn't even get into that I wanted to ask you about. But I just wanted to say thank you for joining me on Gold Theory today. There's fantastic information. I think everyone's going to really get quite a bit out of this, especially anyone looking for a job, looking to hire, looking at how to navigate the corporate environment. It's been incredibly informative. Zach, thank you again. And if anyone's, at this point looking to make any hires or looking for a gig, he is over at Heller. Reach out. You can find him on LinkedIn. And Zach Peikon, thank you. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much.